Muhammad Zia-ul-Haq was a general who served as the sixth president of Pakistan from 1978 until his death in 1988, after declaring martial law in 1977. He was Pakistan's longest-serving head of state. Educated at Delhi University, Zia saw action in World War II as a British Indian Army officer, before opting for Pakistan in 1947 and fighting in the war against India in 1965. In 1970, he led the Pakistani training mission in Jordan, proving instrumental to putting down the Black September insurgency against King Hussein. In recognition, Prime Minister Zia-ul-Haq Ali Bhutto appointed Zia Chief of Army Staff in 1976. Following civil disorder, Zia deposed Bhutto in a military coup and declared martial law on 5 July 1977. Bhutto was controversially tried by the Supreme Court and executed, less than 2 years later, for authorizing the murder of a political opponent. Assuming the presidency in 1978, Zia played a major role in the Soviet war in Afghanistan. Aided by the United States and Saudi Arabia, Zia systematically coordinated the Afghan Mujahideen against the Soviet occupation throughout the 1980s. This culminated in the Soviet Union's withdrawal in 1989, but also led to the proliferation of millions of refugees, with heroin and weaponry into Pakistan's frontier province. On the foreign front, Zia also bolstered ties with China, the European Economic Community, the United States, and emphasized Pakistan's role in the Islamic world, while relations with India worsened amid the Siachen conflict and accusations that Pakistan was aiding the Khalistan movement. Domestically, Zia passed broad-ranging legislation as part of Pakistan's Islamization acts criticized for fomenting religious intolerance. He also escalated Pakistan's atomic bomb project, and instituted industrialization and deregulation, helping Pakistan's economy become among the fastest-growing in South Asia. Averaged over Zia's rule, GDP growth was the highest in the country's history. After lifting martial law and holding non-partisan elections in 1985, Zia appointed Muhammad Khan Junjo as the Prime Minister but accumulated more presidential powers via the Eighth Amendment to the Constitution. After Junjo signed the Geneva Accords in 1988 against Zia's wishes, and called for an inquiry into the Ojra camp disaster, Zia dismissed Junjo's government and announced fresh elections in November 1988. He was killed along with several of his top military officials, and 2 American diplomats in a mysterious plane crash near Bahawalpur on 17 August 1988. To this day, Zia remains a polarizing figure in Pakistan's history, credited for preventing wider Soviet incursions into the region as well as economic prosperity, but decried for weakening democratic institutions and passing laws encouraging religious intolerance. Early life. Muhammad Zia-ul-Haq was born in a Punjabi Aryan family in Jalandhar, Punjab state of the British India, on 12 August 1924 as the second child of Muhammad Akbar, who worked as a staff clerk in the Army GHQ of India Command of British Armed Forces in Delhi and Simla, prior to the independence of Pakistan from British colonial rule in 1947. He completed his initial education in Simla and then attended St. Stephen's College of the University of Delhi for his BA degree in history, which he graduated with highest marks in the college in 1943. Prior to his graduation, Zia joined the British Indian Army in 1943. During his collegiate years, he was noted as an extraordinary talent. He married Shafiq Jahan in 1950. Begum Shafiq Zia died on 6 January 1996. Zia is survived by his sons, Muhammad and Zia-ul-Haq, who went into politics and became a cabinet minister in the government of Nawaz Sharif, and Anwar-ul-Haq and his daughters, Zain, a special needs child, Rubina Salim, who is married to a Pakistani banker and has been living in the United States since 1980, and Karatulan Zia, who currently lives in London, and is married to Pakistani Dr. Adnan Majid. Military service. Zia was commissioned in the British Indian Army with the 25th Cavalry on 12 May 1943 after graduating from the Officer Training School MHOW and fought against Japanese forces in Burma in World War II. After Pakistan gained its independence in 1947, Zia joined the newly formed Pakistan Army as a major. His regiment is now the Guards Cavalry Frontier Force Regiment. He was trained in the United States during 1962 to 1964 at the U.S. Army Command and General Staff College at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. After that, he returned to take over as directing staff at Command and Staff College, Quetta. During the Indo-Pakistani War of 1965, Zia was a tank commander. However, Zia is also said to have been the assistant quartermaster of the 101st Infantry Division. Zia was stationed in Jordan from 1967 to 1970 as a brigadier, helping in the training of Jordanian soldiers, as well as leading the training mission into battle during the Black September operations as commander of Jordanian 2nd Division, a strategy that proved crucial to King Hussein's remaining in power. By 1973, then Major General Zia was commanding the 1st Armored Division at Multan. He was then promoted as Lieutenant General and was appointed commander of the 2nd Strike Corps at Multan in 1975. It was during this time that Zia invited Prime Minister Zia-ul-Haq Ali Bhutto as the Colonel-in-Chief of the Armored Corps at Multan, using his tailor to stitch the blue patrols of his size. The next day, Bhutto was requested to climb a tank and engage a target, where the target was quite obviously hit. After the function, Zia met Bhutto and expressed his loyalty to him. On the 1st of March 1976, Prime Minister Zia-ul-Haq Ali Bhutto approved then 3-star General Lieutenant General Zia as Chief of Army Staff and to be elevated to 4-star rank. This promotion was ahead of a number of more senior officers. This promotion was highly controversial but had political motives for Bhutto, who saw Zia as firmly religious and an apolitical military figure who had distaste of politics. This was the same motives and move made by future Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif, who promoted Pervez Musharraf based on his political ambitions as Chief of Army Staff, but met the same fate as Bhutto in 1999. At the time of his nominating the successor to the outgoing Chief of Army Staff General Tika Khan, the Lieutenant Generals in order of seniority were Muhammad Sharif, Muhammad Akbar Khan, Aftab Ahmed Khan, Azmat Bakshawan, Aga Ibrahim Akram, Abdul Majid Malik, Ghulam Julani Khan, and Muhammad Zia-ul-Haq. But Bhutto chose the most junior, superseding 7 more senior lieutenant generals. However, the senior-most at that time, Lieutenant General Muhammad Sharif, though promoted to general, was made the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff Committee, a constitutional post akin to President Fazl-Ilahi Chowdhury. Zia never called Bhutto Mr. Prime Minister, instead he called him Sla when speaking to him. Planning of coup. Prime Minister Bhutto began facing considerable criticism and increasing unpopularity as his term progressed. The Democratic Socialists Alliance, who had previously allied with Bhutto, began to diminish as time progresses, initially targeting leader of the opposition Wali Khan and his opposition National Awami Party, also a socialist party. Despite the ideological similarity of the two parties, the clash of egos egos both inside and outside the National Assembly became increasingly fierce, starting with the federal government's decision to oust the NAP provincial government in Balochistan province for alleged secessionist activities, and culminating in the banning of the party and arrest of much of its leadership after the death of a close lieutenant of Bhutto's, Hayat Sherpa, in a bomb blast in the frontier town of Peshawar. Civil disorders against Bhutto dissidents also increased within the Pakistan People's Party, and the murder of leading dissident Ahmed Raza Kasuri's father led to public outrage and intra-party hostility as Bhutto was accused of masterminding the crime. PPP leaders such as Ghulam Mustafa Khan openly condemned Bhutto and called for protests against his regime. The political crisis in the northwest frontier province and Balochistan intensified as civil liberties remained suspended, and an estimated 100,000 troops deployed that were accused of abusing human rights and killing large numbers of civilians. 1977 parliamentary elections. On the 8th of January 1977, a large number of opposition political parties grouped to form the Pakistan National Alliance. Bhutto called fresh elections, and PNA participated fully in those elections. They managed to contest the elections jointly even though there were grave splits on opinions and views within the party. The PNA faced defeat but did not accept the results, alleging that the election was rigged. They proceeded to boycott the provincial elections. Despite this, there was a high voter turnout in the national elections. However, as provincial elections were held amidst low voter turnout and an opposition boycott, the PNA declared the newly elected Bhutto government as illegitimate. Coup d'etat. Soon, all the opposition leaders called for the overthrow of Bhutto's regime. Political and civil disorder intensified, which led to more unrest. On the 21st of April 1977, Bhutto imposed martial law in the major cities of Karachi, Lahore and Hyderabad. However, a compromised agreement between Bhutto and opposition was ultimately reported. Zia planned the coup d'etat carefully, as he knew Bhutto had integral intelligence in the Pakistan Armed Forces, and many officers, including Chief of Air Staff Air Marshals Zulfikar Ali Khan and Major General Zia-ul-Hussein Malik, GOC of 23rd Mountain Division, Major General Nasir-ul-Baba, DG of Directorate General for the Military Intelligence, and Vice Admiral Saeed Muhammad Hassan, were loyal to Bhutto. The coup transpired in the small hours of the 5th of July 1977. Before the announcement of any agreement, Bhutto and members of his cabinet were arrested by troops of military police under the order of Zia. Bhutto tried to call Zia but all telephone lines were disconnected. When Zia spoke to him later, he reportedly told Bhutto that he was sorry that he had been forced to perform such an unpleasant task. Zia and his military government portrayed the coup as a spontaneous response to a difficult situation, but his response was a complete contradiction. Soon after the coup, Zia told the British journalist Edward Bear of Newsweek, "I am the only man who took this decision, and I did so on 1700 hours on the 4th of July after hearing the press statement which indicated that the talks between Mr. Bhutto and the opposition had broken down. Had an agreement been reached between them, I would certainly never have done what I did." However, Zia's Chief of Army Staff General Khalid Mahmood Arif contradicted Zia's statement when Arif noted that the coup had already been planned, and the senior leadership of Pakistan Armed Forces had solid information. Therefore, Arif met with Bhutto on an emergency basis, stressing and urging Bhutto to rush negotiations with the opposition. By Arif's and independent experts' accounts, the talks had not broken down down even though the coup was very much in the offing. Zia further argued that fair play against Bhutto had been necessitated by the prospect of a civil war that Bhutto had been planning, by distributing weapons to his supporters. However, Arif strongly rejected Zia's remarks on Bhutto, and citing no evidence that weapons were found or recovered at any of the party's election offices, the military junta did not prosecute Bhutto on the charge of planning civil war. Immediately, the Chief of Naval Staff Admiral Muhammad Sharif announced his and the Navy's strong support for Zia and his military government. But the Chief of Air Staff General Zia-ul-Haq Ali Khan remains unsupported, while the Chairman Joint Chiefs of Staff Committee General Muhammad Sharif remains neutral, while he silently expressed his support to Prime Minister Zia-ul-Haq Bhutto. In 1978, Zia pressured President Fazl Ilahi Chowdhury to appoint General Anwar Shamim as Chief of Air Staff and Admiral Karamat Rahman Niazi as Chief of Naval Staff in 1979. On Zia's recommendation, President Ilahi appointed Admiral Muhammad Sharif as chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, hence making the admiral the highest-ranking officer and principal military advisor overlooking all of the inter-services, including the chiefs of staff of the respected forces. In 1979, the chiefs of Army, Navy, and the Air Force, including the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, validated the coup as constitutional and legal under the war-torn circumstances, pledging the support to Zia as well. United States sponsorship. The United States, notably the Reagan administration, was an ardent supporter of Zia's military regime and a close ally of Pakistan's conservative-leaning ruling military establishment. The Reagan administration declared Zia's regime as the frontline ally of the United States in the fight against the threat of communism. American legislators and senior officials, most notable were Zbigniew Brzezinski, Henry Kissinger, Charlie Wilson, Joanne Herring, and the civilian intelligence officers Michael Pillsbury and Gustav Rakotos, and senior U.S. military officials General John William Vesey and General Herbert M. Wassam, had been long associated with the Zia military regime, where they had made frequent trips to Pakistan advising on expanding the idea of establishment in the political circle of Pakistan. Nominally, the American conservatism of Ronald Reagan's Republican Party influenced Zia to adopt his idea of Islamic conservatism as the primary line of his military government, forcefully enforcing the Islamic and other religious practices in the country. The socialist orientation had greatly alarmed the capitalist forces in Pakistan and as well as brought a clinging Beltos alarm to the United States, who feared the loss of Pakistan as an ally in the Cold War. Many of Pakistan's political scientists and historians widely suspected that the riots and coup against Zia-ul-Haq Ali Bhutto was orchestrated with help of the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency and the United States government, because United States' growing fear of Bhutto's socialist policies, which were seen as sympathetic towards the Soviet Union and had built a bridge that allowed Soviet Union to be involved in Pakistan, and had access through Pakistan's warm water port, something that the United States was unable to gain access since the establishment of Pakistan. In 1947, former U.S. Attorney General Ramsey Clark widely suspected the United States' involvement in bringing down the Bhutto's government, and publicly accused the United States' government after attending the trial. On the other hand, the United States refused any involvement in Bhutto's fall, and argued that it was Bhutto who had alienated himself over the 5 years. While witnessing the dramatic fall of Bhutto, Bhutto, one U.S. diplomat in American embassy in Islamabad, wrote that, during Bhutto's 5 years in Pakistan's helm, Bhutto had retained an emotional hold on the poor masses who had voted him overwhelmingly in 1970's general elections. At the same time, however, Bhutto had many enemies. The socialist economics and nationalization of major private industries during his first 2 years on office had badly upset the business circles. An ill-considered decision to take over the wheat milling, rice husking, sugar mills, and cotton ginning industries in July of 1976 had angered the small business owners and traders. Both leftists, socialists and communists, intellectuals, students, and trade unionists felt betrayed by Bhutto's shift to center right-wing conservative economics policies and by his growing collaboration with powerful feudal lords, Pakistan's traditional power brokers. After 1976, Bhutto's aggressive authoritarian personal style and often high-handed way of dealing with political rivals, dissidents, and opponents had also alienated many. Postponement of elections and call for accountability. After assuming power as chief martial law administrator, Zia shortly appeared on national television, PTV, promising to hold new and neutral parliamentary elections within the next 90 days. My sole aim is to organize free and fair elections, which would be held in October this year. Soon after the polls, power will be transferred to the elected representatives of the people. I give a solemn assurance that I will not deviate from this schedule. He also stated that the Constitution of Pakistan had not been abrogated, but temporarily suspended. Zia did not trust the civilian institutions and legislators to ensure the country's integrity and sovereignty. Therefore, in October 1977, he announced the postponement of the electoral plan and decided to start an accountability process for the politicians. On television, Zia strongly defended his decision for postponing the elections and demanded that scrutiny of political leaders who had engaged in malpractice in the past. Thus, the PNA adopted its policy of retribution first, elections later. Zia's policy severely tainted his credibility, as many saw the broken promises malicious. Another motive was that Zia widely suspected that once out of power, the size of the Pakistan People's Party rallies would swell and better performance in elections was possible. This led to request for postponement of elections by the right-wing Islamists as well as left-wing socialists, formerly allied with Bhutto, which displaced Bhutto in the first place. Zia dispatched an intelligence unit known as ISI's political wing, sending Brigadier General Zia-ul-Hussein Siddiqui to Bhutto's native province, Sindh, to assess whether people would accept martial law. The political wing also contacted the several right-wing Islamists and conservatives, promising an election, with PNA power sharing the government with Zia. Zia successfully divided and separated the secular forces from right-wing Islamists and conservatives, and later purged each member of the secular front. A disqualification tribunal was formed, and several individuals who had been members of parliament were charged with malpractice and disqualified from participating in politics at any level for the next 7 years. A white paper document was issued, incriminating the deposed Bhutto government on several counts. It is reported by senior officers that when Zia met federal secretaries for the first time as leader of the country after martial law, he said that he does not possess the charisma of Bhutto, personality of Ayub Khan, of the legitimacy of Liaquat Ali Khan, thereby implying how can he be marketed